But the one thing about all this rubbish is that it's not just an eyesore and a pain in the backside to clear up. This rubbish poses a genuine threat to every ordinary householder in the town.
The watercourse itself flows directly underneath Llanelli town centre, just a few hundred yards downstream of here. If any of these items get washed down the river in floods, then they can get jammed in the culvert, which is a big tunnel, and that can then cause flooding for local residents.
Andy and Laura Pearce live here with their 5 young children. Just a matter of months after they moved in, a rascal dumped a load of rubbish in the river, blocking it up, and the family woke up to one of the worst days of their lives. A mess that takes your breath away.
The entire driveway here was covered in water. We tried to close the gates to stop more water getting in, but it was ineffective and too difficult to close. The water came all the way up to the garage doors, so we had to sandbag both the garage doors to avoid water getting into the garage and wrecking what we've got stored in the garage. And the entire garden again was completely underwater to the level of a couple of feet. So it was a real mess around here. The whole area was floating with other people's rubbish. The bins were due to be collected that day that the flooding happened, and there was people's rubbish bags floating into the driveway.
What a nightmare. And as the day wore on, that nightmare got worse. The Environment Agency arrived at Andy and Laura's house to help with sandbags to put in all the doorways. But the water was rising, and it wasn't long before water started seeping in through the front door.
The front porch over here filled up to about 2 foot deep with water, and it was only the sandbags on this secondary door that stopped the water coming into the house. The flood water was so high out on the road that it was coming up to the top of our wall, which is 3 foot high.
And with rain forecast, the whole street spent a terrifying night not knowing whether the water would force its way into their homes. Some were luckier than others.
Our elderly neighbours flooded so badly that they needed lifting out of their house in the middle of the night because the water had come in so deep that they had to be taken out.
In fact, it was 24 hours before the water started to subside, but the damage had already been done.
The consequences, of the flood to us were awful. The house was filthy. The floodwater was really dirty. The sand, the sand that came in was with the water made it really difficult to clear up. There was quite a bit of damage to the house, and it was awful. The whole of the garden basically was just covered in debris and rubbish, and just right to the back of our house on the patio area.
It took the Pearces days to clean the mess and set them back thousands of pounds to fix the damage. The 24-hour rescue operation also ran into thousands of pounds for the Environment Agency, and all because some selfish scoundrel couldn't be bothered to chuck out their rubbish responsibly.
Now we've realised that it was actually fly tipping that caused that flood. It does make me really angry when I think about it. I don't think the people that sort of chuck stuff in rivers, like tyres, mattresses, huge amounts of rubbish, actually have any idea of the amount of stress and upset that it can cause people.
And nowhere is that stress more evident than for Andy and Laura's neighbours.
The elderly neighbours, their house was actually flooded quite seriously, and they have really suffered because of it and want to move house, and it's a really sad situation that someone has to move out of their retirement home because of what's happened with people dumping rubbish into the river.
That is terribly sad. These rotten rogues just had no idea of the long-term effect their selfish actions are having on decent people.
If we'd had to make a large insurance claim, we probably wouldn't have got insurance again. And the value of the house potentially dropped, so it's something which, has affected us and has got quite long-term consequences potentially.
And later, we'll join the battle to beat these filthy, rotten scoundrels.
Quite often, if it is on a big incident, it's not a very safe place to be. It's a very dangerous place to come down.
The river and flooding people's homes. An ongoing war is being waged day in, day out against the culprits, and Mark is on the front line for the good guys.
Despite the fact it's a lovely spring day, you can still get flooding. Earlier on this week, we had an incident where people had fly-tipped tyres into a local watercourse down in Llangennech, and the tyres had made their way down the watercourse and had got wedged in a flap valve.
A flap valve is basically a gigantic cat flap that stays open for normal flows of water and closes as soon as the tide comes in to stop it from flooding houses inland. In theory, that is, until rubbish interferes with it.
Tyre got wedged into the flap valve, held it open, and it had caused flooding.
This is the kind of thing the guys from the Environment Agency are fighting every day, and keeping those flap valves clear is an exhausting job.
I'm responsible for a team of guys which come round to these rivers. Our main priority is the maintenance as far as the flap valves, trash screens, any trees, blockages, pollution. All these things are dealt with. Obviously, when you send a team down here, quite often, if it is on a big incident, it's going to be in the early hours, or it's going to be under darkness, with the rain. You know, it's not a very safe place to be. You know, it's a very dangerous place to come down. And unfortunately, to think that a lot of this is man-made contribution to the problem, yeah, it's really sad.
I couldn't agree more. Sad, and to be honest, pretty outrageous that people like him and his team are having to risk their own lives, all because of the actions of a few selfish scoundrels.
Yeah, we shouldn't be seeing these things washing down week after week after week. It's an ongoing problem, unfortunately, you know. Ideally, people will take more responsibility.
You hear that, fly tippers? Take responsibility for your own rubbish. Upstream, the war continues, and they're stepping up the game and bringing in the big toys to reach the really nasty stuff lurking below the surface.
Today we're using a lorry, and on the back of the lorry we've got a special crane that's mounted on there with a grab. The reason we're using that is to take out of the river things like trolleys and mattresses, which are quite light. Once they get thrown into a river, become extremely heavy, and then it's very difficult for our men to remove it from those watercourses.
It's all very impressive, but just take a look at the number of people who have to get involved in this operation. Now, I know I'm in danger of sounding like a broken record here, but think of all the time, money and effort that could be better spent if we lived in a world without filthy fly tippers. Right across Britain, our environment enforcers are working tirelessly to make our country a cleaner and greener place to live. Join us next time when we'll be chasing down more filthy, rotten scoundrels.